This is what that petition might look like today, with people expressing their support with their likes. While we may think of a protest as people marching on campus holding signs, modern activists are using social media to share their messages. This toy is another project they're working on here. Instead of struggling to hit this tiny button in the hamster's paw, a child with a disability can hit this larger, more accessible button. When bees pollinate flowers like these, the color of the pollen determines the color of the honey, giving you variations like this from last fall, last spring, and this fall. Smith says at the time of the cookie dunk, the line to get in stretched from this entrance here all the way back to here! If the water inside your pipes does freeze, the Red Cross says your best bet is to try to warm them from the outside. Now, you might be tempted to use something like this, but that's a fire hazard and could do more harm than good. The gentle heat from something like a hairdryer should do the trick. That was in Salt Lake, but as I mentioned, people gathered right there on the Block A to show their support for Palestine. They walked around the quad past where I'm standing right now. I found out how their protest was similar and different to the ones we saw in Salt Lake.
We must come together to demand an end to the violence.
Rallying support for Palestine, this group's assembly on Utah State University's quad went from vocal to silent. They walked around the quad waving the Palestinian flag to raise awareness about the attacks in Gaza.
It's so heartbreaking. We came to show our support for them.
Protests and marches like this have become a common sight on college campuses.
One of the biggest things that we see with college campuses generally is a demonstration to raise awareness.
While some protests look like this, some past protests at USU looked like this. This is a letter students wrote to the university president in 1965 to demand the right to smoke on campus. They sent the letter to the board of directors and the university newspaper and gathered signatures on petitions like this. This is what that petition might look like today, with people expressing their support with their likes. While we may think of a protest as people marching on campus holding signs, modern activists are using social media to share their messages.
Social media has been really helpful in terms of the way that it's able to ripple out, but we can also feel inundated with kind of a saturation of pieces going on where things that are actually important to us and do actually matter can kind of fly by the wayside, fly right over the head.
The Grad Students of Color Association used this graphic to publicize their event, but no matter how you choose to spread your message, Utah State University says all students have a voice here.
We really want people to respect how other people are expressing their own views.
These marchers, Dorito says, were a good example of respectful protest on campus. Dorito says if you plan on holding a meeting on campus, to give the university a heads up so they can make sure participants and others on campus are safe. Reporting live from the quad, Anna Johnson, ATV News. Back to you at the desk, Ryan.
I've got power wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs, I've even got pediatric wheelchairs.
It may look like a scrapyard full of parts, but Utah State University's Assistive Technology Lab is full of hidden gems.
People in the community donate equipment to us, we look it over, we'll make sure it's working. If it's not working, we will take all of the parts off of it.
Workers and volunteers repair and rebuild wheelchairs, walkers, and other tech for people with disabilities.
We don't actually charge people to fix their equipment.
Their funding comes from federal grants, so they don't charge for labor. And since the parts are donated, you can get what you need for a fraction of the cost of new.
You can buy everything in here for 25% market value. I sell power wheelchairs in here for $250.
If they don't have a donated part, they can 3D print instead.
Right now we're printing some spacers for a teeny tiny infant-sized power wheelchair.
This toy is another project they're working on here. Instead of struggling to hit this tiny button in the hamster's paw, a child with a disability can hit this larger, more accessible button. They don't just fix wheelchairs. The technicians here build custom parts.
Brandon helped build me an extension that just flips over so that it covers me and my dog, and so we don't get wet no more.
Larson says his new wheelchair awning has changed everything.
Oh man, It's like day and night.
As both a client and a volunteer, Larson says he's seen how the program changes lives.
No matter what they need, they find a way to make it work.
Anna Johnson, ATV News. Buzzing around. Pollinating our flowers and vegetables. These bees are hard at work.
There's 50 or 60,000 bees in that hive.
Kirk Johnson is one of the over 100,000 hobby beekeepers in the United States.
Put it in my spit.
He's also my dad.
I really don't need more than one. I get 150 to 200 pounds of honey. At least I have the last 3 or 4 years.
He's had a hive in our front yard for 7 years.
It takes 12 bees to make a teaspoon of honey.
When bees pollinate flowers like these, the color of the pollen determines the color of the honey, giving you variations like this from last fall, last spring, and this fall.
We teach beginning beekeeping clear up through advanced beekeeping.
USU Extension's Thriving Hives program helps beginning beekeepers start their hives. Gunnell says having a beehive can improve your home garden.
My best gardening years were the times that I had bees.
Gunnell says USU Extension's resources make starting a hive simple, and having bees is a rewarding, if expensive, hobby.
Watching them work and come and go, and they're amazing. They're fascinating creatures.
Anna Johnson, ATV News.
This is a community iftar.
This is the second annual community iftar.
Iftar is an Arabic word for breakfast.
It's breaking the fast.
During Ramadan, we don't eat from sunrise to sunset, and so our first meal is the one at sunset. So it is the equivalent of a breakfast.
We're just all sharing a meal together. People of the Islam faith, it's kind of a minority here in Cache Valley.
I think the majority of the community is made of students because this is a college town. I'm used to being in a community where at least one event happens during Ramadan, and when it did not happen, I felt like I had to make it happen.
Religion is one of those things that people have very, very strong opinions about.
I think especially in a place like Utah, when it's not exactly a very diverse place, people don't really have a lot of opportunities to get to meet people from outside of their faith or their race or their culture.
We have people who are Muslim and then people who are from different faith traditions.
These events help to build relationship of trust and appreciation and give us the opportunity to intentionally engage, to learn something about one another and to find common value.
Communities are built of people who are all from different backgrounds.
We need to be able to have conversations with people who are of different traditions. This is what I live for.
Cache Valley is more diverse than we think.
And I'm Anna Johnson. As you can see, I'm starting off outside, where last week people met to show their support for Palestine. Have you seen a UFO lately? It may not be because they aren't there. It may be that your porch light is too bright. I went to the USU Observatory and learned it's not just UFOs we're missing out on in the night sky. It's like speed dating, but you share your faith instead. USU's Interfaith Student Association held a speed faithing event in an attempt to set a world record for the largest one ever.
Anna, were any of our Aggie sports teams radioactive over the weekend?
Well, radioactive might be a little bit much, but a lot of our Aggies have been on fire lately. We had wins in soccer, volleyball, and way more. I'll have all that coming up. How do you honor loved ones who've died? For Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, people use ofrendas. Lotan Abir, a Utahn, was one of the 14 Americans killed by Hamas. Skyview has been undefeated in our region, thanks in part to star running back Brevin Egbert. And thanks for joining us on this edition of ATV News.